Hey there, Chad here. Thanks for joining me. This is Pro Cycling Manager 25, and I thought in this episode we would talk about the attributes that make your rider who they are. Now, I didn't talk about this earlier, and I probably should have. This is a complete beginner's guide, and it is pretty important to know what the different attributes do for your rider. So what I thought we'd do is create a new game. We're going to do it in Pro Cyclist. That's the easiest way to review these, I think, and we'll go normal, and we have to give our game a name. I'm just going to call it Test Rider, because why not? We're really just using it to get to this screen here. So you can randomize this guy, by the way, and you can fill in those fields as you wish as well. We'll just go with Alejandro Hernandez from Spain here. He's from Madrid area. You can also apparently replace the picture, although it doesn't really tell you how to do that. So I'm not entirely sure how you might do that. There's probably a folder that if there's a TGA sitting in it, it'll pull up a list of them here. That's my guess, but I don't know what that folder is. Nonetheless, that is something you can do if you want to give that a try. I'm pretty fine with all this. This is just for fun, so we can get to this screen. And I thought we would talk about the axes and then also the actual attributes. So the cycling, you basically have different archetypes of riders. You have riders that are good at stage races. That's races that extend past one day. Climbers, those are people who are good in the mountains generally. Time trial is generally an individual effort where you are basically setting down the fastest pace you can. You're not allowed to draft, things like that. And that is a talent, being able to ride on your own, etc. So sprinter is somebody who's really good at speed at the end of a race. And this says, in the last 200 meters, for the most part, his role is to spare on effort for 200 kilometers in order to give his all in the last 200 meters. And I would say that's pretty accurate for what I have seen. Sprinters can be fun. Generally, they're good at gathering the points during stage events as well for the sprint stages. And we'll move on. Puncher is somebody who basically holds on to effort to attack in the final stretch of a race. I think puncher and climber can get a little bit confusing because puncher tends to be good on short climbs and can aim for victories in the most prestigious classics of the race calendar, because when it ends on a hill, they have an advantage there at the end. Northern Classics, that one's a little foreign in term, and basically it has to do with bicycle races that are done primarily on cobblestone or otherwise rugged terrain. If you've ever ridden a bicycle on cobblestone for an extended period, you know what this is about. It is not an easy task. It rattles you. It is uncomfortable. There's so many things about riding on rough terrain. Even just grooved pavement can be so disorienting in riding a bike. It's fantastic. You think, in a car, you don't even notice it, right? You hear it, but that's about it. And on the bicycle, you feel every one of those little grooves. It's pretty fantastic. But the Northern Classics tend to be races that feature segments where there are things like cobblestones or whatnot, where the riders have to adapt to a more rugged and difficult terrain. You don't see a whole lot of those in stage races. They are there. They'll be very short sections of these, and it can really make a difference, particularly in Pro Cycling Manager. It can make a huge difference if you're not ready for that or act correctly on it when you're hitting it. And then Baroudeur is the idea of the rider who is good on the long flats and gently rolling terrain. And there's a lot of history about that word, and we're not going to go into that in this episode. So in this particular game, you get to select your main axis of what you want to do. Now, I have already stated I tend to like going with climbers, and secondarily, I tend to go with puncher. Those tend to be the two I do. And these are your base stats when you pick that combination. These, I believe, are fixed regardless of your racer. There are possibly, I don't know, does this change those at all? It does not. We'll come to this in just a minute. So whatever combination I choose here, these numbers will adjust just a little bit, but when I come back around to that same combination, the numbers will be the same as they were. Now, the game states that the mid 60s are basically the middling. So attributes go from 50 to 85, and the 60s is kind of where you're at the average of things in general. So your racer is probably, you could call him a little above average. He's got a few things that are poking through the higher numbers here. And that makes sense. You're the hero of the game. That's really the intent, right? So I'm going to set this up as a climber puncher, and we'll talk about the rest of this. Real quick though, the potential, this basically limits what your maximum values are, and you can have fun with it. Do what you choose to do. I go with Grand Champion because, as I just said, I'm the hero of the game. I want to be as possibly the best that is out there ever and forever. If you want more challenge, you're going to want to adjust these downward. More power to you. That's not my style. We're going to go with the Grand Champion. Although I will say that I have considered doing like a world-class one where I'm not necessarily the top rider on my team, but maybe I'm a really close second. That might be fun sometime. Okay, let's talk about these attributes because they're important and they can be confusing. The attributes, kind of think of them as a transmission in an automobile. You've got the engine. We'll talk about a gas engine. You got the engine that is churning and it is putting out energy and work, but it doesn't turn the wheels until the transmission interacts with it to get the wheels moving. And the way I look at these attributes is depending on your current state that you're in the game, a different attribute or potentially more than one attribute may be in play. And the higher the number, the better the transmission. The energy that's going in gets processed more efficiently and you have better outcome when these numbers are higher when they're being used. That's why I kind of compare it to a transmission. Maybe there's a better analogy there. Ultimately, that's really what the effect is. So some of them seem self-explanatory, and I think they are, but let's go ahead and make sure that they're clear on every one of these. So flat, that's when you're riding on a flat surface, right? Well, what is flat? In the game, historically, that has been defined as less than 3% climb and more than 3% descent. So 3% is the important part there. If you're an up or down up to 3% grade, you are on flat. Enough said. That's what that is. Now the next three get really super confusing, at least to me. I process this differently, and the expectation of what these mean probably different than what they actually mean in the game. So we're going to cover them together, and then we're going to skip them and come back to them to explain them in a little more detail. Mountain, medium mountain, and hills, those attributes apply at different times when the climb is 3% or more. Any particular one can apply at any time for any grade over 3%. It has to do with effort, not with steepness of grade. And that is, I think, where a lot of people go off the rails. They assume mountain means really steep, medium mountain means kind of steep, and hilly means not flat but not steep. And that's not the case. So let's come back to that one in a minute. We'll talk a little more in depth on that shortly. The rest of these, mostly self-explanatory. Time trial. This is your speed in long time trials, which are 20 kilometers or more. So if you're in a time trial, that is the value that'll be used if it's more than 20 kilometers. Prologue is for short time trials, 20 kilometers or less. Actually, up to 20 kilometers is how they define it. Cobblestones, we kind of talked on that. It's the speed on rough cobblestone roads. And by the way, your map will show you, the profile of the race will show you where there's rough spots. I'll try to call some of those out as we get to those races. I hate those parts. I'm not good at it. I'm not good at figuring out how I should navigate them. But then again, I'm not good at this game. We've already established that. So feel free to compare your outcomes to mine and feel good about it, because at least there's one person you're better than at this. We'll keep going here. Sprint is effectively your speed at maximum power. It's used primarily in finishes. I think anytime you do a sprint, which is I think it's the Q key while we're actually racing, this is what gets used. And I think that makes sense. This is how fast you can go when you're giving it your all. Acceleration is your speed in changing pace. How quickly do you go from 0 to 60 effectively? I think that one makes a lot of sense to a lot of people. And by the way, punchers, that's what they're good at, because they're good at establishing that very short effort extension of where they are to try to close a gap or to pull away for a very short period of time at the end. Downhill, easy enough. That's your speed on downhill or less than 3%. Well, okay, however you want to look at that. When you're going down at a 3% or more grade. So that's when downhill kicks in. Generally, it's on your downhill efforts, and you can see the grade at any particular time. It's in your lower left corner of your window. You can kind of see what that looks like. I'll try to call that out in a future race. Barrador, this one is maybe a little difficult to understand because it's less physical, and my understanding is it's more about the rider's temperament. I kind of get the impression if we were playing Dungeons and Dragons, this would be their wisdom kind of stat, maybe a cross between wisdom and constitution. So what they talk about is that it is their combativeness. Okay, so competitors, top level competitors don't like to lose, right? And so I can kind of see that. I think it probably measures that to some extent. But the other thing is they specifically call it out in creating breakaways or when riding alone. So I think what I've seen in the real world, what it's described as, is the mentality of being able to just endure what is going on in your current existence while you're on a bike. I have never ridden a bike for more than 55 miles at a time. When you think about somebody being on a bike for 5 or 6 hours and going, the better part of 200 and maybe 250 kilometers, holy cow, that is a thing. And Barrador, I think, has to do with the mentality of being able to do that, being able to do it alone, and also the fortitude to establish a breakaway when you need to be able to do it. I have been interested, and I don't know how to do it. I've been interested in trying to manipulate that number up to its maximum and seeing what happens, like in early races when I'm in Continental. If I had that and I just want to make a breakaway right away, sometimes I'm not able to create the breakaway. I've had more than one race where I've gotten frustrated beyond all get out because I can't get a breakaway started. And I have a feeling that this is a factor in that. And if I had a really high value there, it would be much easier. The next couple are pretty straightforward. Stamina is your energetic potential for long distance effort. That's how long you can ride. That's how long you can ride well. In my previous video, you saw that I went on an extended breakaway, and right there at the end, I just didn't quite have enough. I was 8 kilometers from the end, and that was it for me. I was done and fell well back in the pack, and that was too bad. A little more stamina, I might have been able to endure just enough more that I might have been able to finish that extra 8 kilometers in better standing. Resistance is your energetic potential for intense effort. I think what resistance really is working with, and they don't really give an example on this one that I have found, but I think what resistance is when you decide that you're going to do that breakaway sprint to try to get away. Acceleration is important. That's the physical limitation of how fast you can move from 0 to 60. Your sprint speed is what your top speed would end up being. And I think resistance has to do with how long you can extend or perform that particular task before you've burned through your energy reserves. Or more specifically, the higher the number, the less energy it burns while you're doing those things. So of course you want the higher number because then you would be able to do it for longer and have better output with that. Finally, recovery. Recovery is really straightforward, but it can be confusing if you just don't know. And that is, it deals strictly with how much you recover between races. It has nothing to do with in-race outputs or anything like that. It is not how quickly your bars refill, none of that. It is strictly between races, from stage to stage, how well you adapt from day to day. And that's what the attributes are. So let's go back and talk about mountain medium mountain, and hills, because this took me a lot of time to fully understand, and I think I get it now. The idea is, if you think about what somebody who's going to ride in mountains needs versus somebody who is going to try to sprint up a little bitty hill as fast as they can needs, those are two different, first of all, they're frankly two different muscle groups. They're different types of riding, and the mountain ones deal more with the stamina level of it. It's a certain amount of effort for an extended period of time. Hills has more to do with extreme effort, but for a very short period of time. And so when you think about this in combination, what you end up with is hills is what you can do when you're pushing extremely hard on a climb. Mountain is what you do when you're not pushing hard, but it's more of the grind. Medium mountains was introduced, I think, in PCM23. Maybe it was 18. I don't remember. It was a while ago. It was introduced as kind of a middling number between the two. And before that number came in, what they basically said is if the amount of effort you're putting in is 1, and that's literally your effort meter. If it's anywhere from 1 to 85%, you're using mountain, and you're strictly using mountain. That's all it is. Then from 95% and above, you're using hills. That's the attribute that applies. So when you bump that thing all the way up to 99, you're using your hill attribute and only your hill attribute. The numbers between those two, between 85% and 95%, was effectively a sliding scale of a meld between the two values. That's what they were doing. And then at some point they introduced medium mountain, and medium mountain has never been super well defined by the company or the developer, to my knowledge. I haven't found anything on it, but the assumption was that is what you're using. So instead of melding mountain and hills across that 10%, there's medium mountain has been introduced. That is your effort at exactly 90%. Medium mountain is the one you're using. From 85 to 90, it's a meld of mountain and medium mountain, or blend. And then for 90 to 95, it is a blend of medium mountain and hill. It's just another number for them to have in there to kind of differentiate and allow you to be a little more specific with your character that you have created. Okay, I think that covers the attributes pretty much as well as I'm able to understand them at this point. And I have done some research here. This isn't like me just making this up. I do want to be clear on that. I had a little bit of help with some browsers and things like that, looking it up. And Cyanide does have a page that's dedicated to how the attributes are defined. I've pretty much read those to you in this video. There's not a lot more information on those. I would be more than happy to provide it if I can. I have kind of done some forum diving. I've had some conversations with folks that have dealt directly with the developer, and these are the percentages and numbers that I have gotten from them. And there's no reason to believe they changed in 25. These were definitely current in 23. And I can't find where there were significant changes from 23 to 24. So I would have to say these are the same numbers, and the company is on the record that there were no engine changes coming over to 25 in light of the Unreal graphics change is really the big thing, and then the few things they did with sponsors on the career mode. So these attribute comments should be accurate as of 2020, the PCM25, and I hope they're helpful for you. Kind of wordy and not a whole lot to look at. I realize that. I hope it gives you a little bit of an edge in the game when you're playing it, though. And thank you for hanging around and listening to this. If it's in your heart to give me a like and a subscribe, I would really appreciate that. And always, comments are welcome. Love to see what people are thinking and what they'd like to see next. Always happy where I can bring somebody something that they are looking for. So thank you for your time, and until next time, fair travels.